Hey there. Tonight I want you to picture something ancient. Not just old, but forgotten. Not just ruins, but questions carved into stone. And not just mystery, but the kind that makes your spine itch because you know something's not right. Most of you probably haven't heard of Nan Madol, and that's exactly the problem. Nan Madol isn't in your history books. It's not in your school curriculum. Hell, even Google Earth hides it in shadow. But it exists. Off the coast of Pompeii, in the middle of the Pacific, 2 artificial islets, built on a coral reef, connected by a network of stone canals, a city floating on water, and no one knows how it got there. This isn't Atlantis. This isn't myth. It's real. You can walk those ruins, touch those stones, but you can't explain them. Because the basalt columns, some weighing up to 50 tons, were stacked like black ribs of some long-dead god. Massive hexagonal logs laid out like Lincoln logs for giants. And this was done over 1,000 years ago, with no metal tools, no wheels, no cranes. But here's the catch: no oral history, no records, just ruins and silence. So tonight, I want you to forget what you think you know about human history. Because the story you've been told, the timeline you've memorized, leaves places like Nan Madol in the blank margins, where only whispers go. Turn off the lights. Turn up the hum of your fan. Let your thoughts drift toward the ocean, a place where history doesn't die, it sinks. And sometimes, it doesn't want to be found. Welcome to Nan Madol. Let's start with the location. Because location, in this story, is everything. You don't build a stone city on top of a coral reef unless you're trying to prove something, or hide something. Nan Madol lies off the southeastern shore of Pompeii, one of the main islands in the Federated States of Micronesia. But it doesn't belong to Pompeii. Not real. It's older. Stranger. Like it drifted in from another world. Locals call it the Venice of the Pacific. But that's a mistake. Venice is built to survive. Nan Madol is built to be forgotten. It's a city made of basalt, volcanic stone, stacked 25 feet high in some places, held together not with mortar, but with weight. Just stone on stone on stone, laid out in a grid. Temple complexes, tombs, housing platforms. A full-on city designed for ceremony, rule, and ritual. But here's what should make your stomach turn. Nobody knows where the basalt came from. There are no quarries nearby. The closest likely source is a mountain range across the island, 25 miles away, over dense jungle, through steep volcanic ridges. Try hauling 50-ton rocks through that. Now try doing it 100,000 times, with no roads, no animals, no wheels, just human hands, or something else. Because that's the thing about Nan Madol. It's less about what we know, and more about what we can't explain. The first outsiders who stumbled across it, they thought it was cursed. When Western explorers found Nan Madol in the 1800s, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. A city in the sea, stone walls rising from salt water, canals flowing like veins, and nothing, no people, no voices, just jungle gnawing at the edges. Locals refused to go there after dark. Some still do. They say the ruins are haunted, guarded, that anyone who disturbs the tombs will die. And sure, maybe that's just folklore. But when the first colonial governor, Victor Berg, visited Nan Madol in 1907, he mocked the stories, laughed at the superstitions. And less than a week later, he was dead. Sudden fever. No warning. Just gone. You want to believe it's coincidence. But this story, it's full of them. Now let's talk about the builders. Because here's where it gets weird. There's no clear consensus on who built Nan Madol. No Ajigoi, agreed-upon date. Archaeologists think construction may have started around the year 1200 AD. Some push it back centuries earlier. But the oral traditions? They speak of two brothers, Olisihpa and Olosohpa, who came from the sea. Tall, strange, powerful. They brought knowledge, they brought magic, and they built. Some versions say they floated the stones with the help of a flying dragon. Others say they used chants to move the basalt through the air. Sound ridiculous? Sure. But not more ridiculous than hauling 100,000 tons of stone across a reef using canoes. So what was Nan Madol? A palace? A prison? A sanctuary? All of the above. It was the ceremonial center of the Saudeleur dynasty, a centralized ruling elite that imposed their will on Pompeii until they were overthrown in the 1500s. But here's the twist. Nan Madol wasn't built for comfort. There's no fresh water, no food sources. You had to import everything. It's like they didn't want people living there. They wanted them trapped there. Think about that. The ruling class made their home on an isolated reef, surrounded by dark water, miles from help. Was it power? Was it paranoia? Or was it protection? Protection from what? That's the question we'll ask in the next part. Because something happened on Nan Madol, something no one talks about. Not in history books, not in classrooms, only in whispers and dreams. So ask yourself, what kind of civilization builds a stone city in the sea, leaves no record of how, and then vanishes? We're just getting started. Let's start with a question. What kind of ruler builds their throne in the middle of the ocean? No farmland, no fresh water, no escape. You don't build a city like that because it makes sense. You build it because you're afraid, or worse, because something told you to. Welcome back to Nan Madol. Last time we talked about the city itself, carved from basalt, floating on a coral reef. But tonight we go deeper. Not just into the stones, but into the water. Because the truth of Nan Madol isn't just buried beneath vines and moss. It's submerged. And if you want to know what really happened here, you'll have to look down into the salt, into the black. Because the ocean remembers what the land has tried to forget. Start with this. Beneath the visible ruins of Nan Madol, beneath the 92 islets and their tangled canals, there are more ruins. Submerged structures, collapsed foundations, massive basalt walls swallowed by the rising sea. They shouldn't be there, but they are. Some of them rest over 7 meters underwater, too deep to be accidental, too orderly to be natural. No one can explain them. They aren't just extensions of the known city. They're older, more eroded, like the ruins of the ruins. And that's the first real crack in the story. Because if parts of Nan Madol are underwater now, that means sea levels have risen. And if they've risen, then those parts must have been dry once. So how old is this city really? Some archaeologists say the site could date back 2,000 years or more. Others say 500. But they're all guessing, because without records, ruins don't give answers. They only raise better questions. And the biggest question is this: who were the people who built what's now underwater? Because if the Saudeleur dynasty ruled from 1200 to the 1500s, then someone else laid the first stones. This is where the myth starts breathing down your neck. Remember the two brothers, Olisihpa and Olosohpa. In the oral tradition of Pompeii, they came from a distant land across the sea in a time before time. They weren't just kings. They were priests, sorcerers, wielders of sacred power. They didn't conquer Pompeii. They tamed it. And Nan Madol, that was their sanctuary, their experiment, their prison. Because here's what people forget about ancient civilizations. Not all of them were true. To thrive. Some were just trying to contain something. And in those stories, the brothers didn't just build Nan Madol for glory. They built it to trap something ancient. Something that lived in the blackness below the reef. Something that had to be kept still. It sounds like legend. Until you remember that most legends start with a truth too terrible to say aloud. Now, let's talk about bones, because the bones don't lie. In 1939, Japanese archaeologists excavating parts of Nan Madol made a grim discovery. Burial chambers beneath the islet of Nan Dawaz, thought to be the royal mortuary, held not just a few remains, but hundreds. Some were normal, but some weren't. There were elongated skulls, unusual dental patterns, traces of deformation consistent not with disease, but with ritual modification. And the really strange part? No tools, no jewelry, no personal belongings buried with the dead. It was as if these bodies weren't meant to be remembered. They were meant to be locked away, like garbage or offerings. So what kind of society throws away its royalty? Or were these something else? Not rulers, not priests, but sacrifices. And here's where we circle back to the reef. Nan Madol is the only known ancient city built entirely on a coral reef. That's not just unusual, it's insane. You can't grow crops on coral. You can't dig wells. It erodes. It shifts. It dies. It's like building your house on quicksand on purpose. Unless you wanted isolation. Unless you needed distance. Unless the reef wasn't a flaw, but a feature, a boundary. Something that says, keep this place separate. Keep this knowledge out. Keep whatever's inside, in. Local legends say the city was cursed. That after the Sodalur were overthrown, Nan Madol fell quickly. It wasn't looted. It wasn't destroyed. It was abandoned. And no one went back. The ruins stood, slowly swallowed by vines and waves, as if the earth itself was trying to ease them. Even today, few Pohnpeians visit the islets at night. Many refuse to speak the old names. They say the spirits there are restless, that lights flicker across the water with no source, that the sound of drums, ancient, low, wet, can still be heard echoing across the canals. And you can laugh. You can call it folklore. But every culture has a place they don't go, not because they don't believe in ghosts, but because they do. So maybe the real mystery of Nan Madol isn't how it was built. Maybe it's why. Maybe the question isn't who the builders were, but what they were trying to stop. And if that's true, if this city wasn't made to celebrate something, but to contain something, then we should be asking ourselves, what's still buried underneath it? What's still watching from below? Because the ocean doesn't forget. It just waits. You ever walk into a place and just feel it? Not see, not hear, just feel. Like the walls are watching you. Like something happened there that was never allowed to leave. That's what people say about Nan Madol. Not just tourists, locals, historians, even divers who swim the canals say the silence feels alive. Like the stones are keeping a secret, a heavy one, and maybe they are. Because tonight, we're going to talk about the people who ruled these ruins, not the builders, but the usurpers. The ones who didn't create Nan Madol, they just moved in. The Sodalur dynasty. And if the city is a wound, the Sodalur were the infection. Most of what we know about the Sodalur comes from oral history, passed down through centuries of whispers and warnings. According to tradition, they came after the city was built. They didn't carve it from basalt. They inherited it, like finding a locked temple and declaring yourself the god inside. But power borrowed from mystery always goes bad. And the Saudeleur were no exception. They ruled Pompeii from somewhere around 1200 AD until the early 1500s. That's over 300 years. But these weren't kings in the way we imagine them. They weren't warlords. They weren't chosen by the people. They were priests, fanatics, obsessed with ritual, with order, with control. And their city, Nan Madol, was the perfect stage. Built to isolate, built to observe, built to watch every movement of their subjects. You lived, you worked, you died under surveillance. The Saudeleur imposed laws so strict they bordered on psychological warfare. You couldn't speak their name. You couldn't stand in their presence. You weren't even allowed to look them in the eye. Disobedience was met with exile, or worse, disappearance. They moved people into Nan Madol from all corners of the island, priests, noble families, workers, then slowly cut them off from the outside world. Food had to be brought in. Water had to be hauled from the mainland. Everyone inside the city became dependent, and that was the point. Nan Madol didn't just isolate its rulers from their people, it turned the whole population into hostages. And over time, that fear hardened into something else: obedience. But here's the thing. Even with all their power, the Saudeleur never felt safe. They built higher walls. They patrolled the canals. They doubled the guards. They filled the city with priests and spies and death rituals. Because even they seemed to believe Nan Madol was never really theirs. They didn't understand its design. They didn't know who built it. They couldn't explain the underwater ruins. But they were terrified of the secrets those stones held. So what do you do when you're ruling a city you don't understand? You suppress the stories. You destroy the old knowledge. You rewrite the myth, and that's exactly what the Saudeleur did. They erased the memory of the builders. They outlawed the old songs. They renamed the temples. But you can't burn a stone, and you can't erase a ghost. Now here's where the story turns. Because all tyrannies fall, but the fall of the Saudeleur, that one felt different. According to legend, the end came not with an army, but with a single man, Isokalekel. His name means God Thunder, and depending on who you ask, he was either a warrior from the west, or something not quite human. The story goes like this. One night a prophecy was whispered by an island priest, that a great storm would come from the sea, and with it, a man who would end the Saudeleur line. That man was Isokalekel. He sailed in from a distant land, bringing with him warriors, chants, and a blade soaked in firelight. But what's strange is how easily he succeeded. The Saudeleur, so paranoid, so fortified, collapsed almost instantly, as if they knew he was coming, as if they welcomed it. The king of Nan Madol didn't die in battle. He disappeared into the forest. Some say he drowned himself. Some say he turned into a spirit. Others say he returned to whatever place he came from before taking the throne. And with that, the dynasty ended. Just gone. But here's what no one talks about. After Isokalekel won, he didn't stay in Nan Madol. He moved inland, built a new capital, far from the reef, far from the ruins. And that's weird. Because if you just conquered the most powerful dynasty in your world, why wouldn't you claim their city? Why abandon it? Unless he knew something, unless he felt it too. That hum under the stones, that silence in the walls, that feeling that you weren't the first ruler here, and you wouldn't be the last. Today, the ruins are still there, but the dynasty vanished. No descendants, no burial grounds, no definitive grave of the Saudeleur king. Just silence. Like history hit a wall, then chose not to climb over it. And here's the kicker. For all their cruelty, the Saudeleur were obsessed with records. Calendars, genealogies, ceremonial logs. And yet, none of it survived. It's like someone, or something, erased them completely. Like the stones themselves rejected their memory. So maybe Nan Madol doesn't just bury its secrets. Maybe it buries the people who try to own them. First the builders, then the Saudeleur, then silence. And now? Now the ruins just wait, covered in moss, haunted by wind, soaked in salt, waiting for someone else to try again. To understand Nan Madol, you have to go back. Not a few centuries, not 1,000 years. I mean really back. To a time before the island, before the reef, before even the name Pohnpei meant anything to anyone. Because if Nan Madol was a monument, it may have been a memorial. And if the builders fled to this place, the real story isn't why they built it. The real story is what they were running from. Here's what we know. Every myth starts with a spark. In Pohnpeian legend, the builders, those two brothers, Olisipa and Olosopa, didn't come from nowhere. They came from a sinking land, a kingdom swallowed by the sea. They sailed east, driven by stars and voices. They were fleeing something. Some say it was a war, others say it was a curse. But the oldest versions, they say it was a punishment. Now pause there. Because this isn't just a story from Micronesia. Across the Pacific, you find echoes of the same theme, over and over again. Sunken lands, drowned cities, survivors who build something new, but never quite forget what they left behind. Hawaiian, Maori, Samoan, Marquesan, even stories from South America and Southeast Asia all share this one strange idea that there was once a great land in the Pacific, advanced, mysterious, and then gone. Some people call it Mu, others call it Kumari Kandam or Lemuria, or even a Polynesian Atlantis. And yeah, on the surface it sounds like fantasy. But sometimes fantasy is just memory with no proof left. Here's where it gets weird. In 1997, sonar scans taken off the coast of Japan revealed something unusual. The Yonaguni Monument. Underwater stone terraces, step pyramids, right angles, carved faces. Some scientists call it a natural formation. Others believe it's a man-made structure, submerged over 10,000 years ago when sea levels rose after the last ice age. And if that's true, then our timelines are wrong. Our maps are wrong. Our history is wrong. Because it means there were builders out here, civilizations, long before we thought possible. And it means that the story of Nan Madol might not have started on Pohnpei, but ended there. So what happened to that lost world? Why did it fall? Well, that depends on who you ask. Some say it was greed. Others say pride. But there's a darker version. One that sounds more like a warning. It goes like this. They learned to shape stone, to move earth, to command the ocean. But in their hunger, they dug too deep. And what they found was older than the sea. Some say the builders of Nan Madol were not just fleeing destruction. They were fleeing judgment. That their land didn't sink by accident. It was buried, on purpose, to trap something. And that Nan Madol was their second attempt. Not a city, not a temple, a seal. Think about the layout of Nan Madol, the concentric canals, the basalt walls, the way the islets form a kind of grid, an unnatural geometry. It doesn't look organic. It looks ritualistic, engineered. Some archaeologists have pointed out that the central islets, where the sacred spaces lie, align with celestial markers, solstices, equinoxes, and deep beneath those islets, basalt vaults, black rooms, still sealed. No one knows what's in them, or what might happen if they were opened. And here's something else no one talks about. There are similar sites scattered across the Pacific: stone cities, underwater terraces, cyclopean ruins made of stone so massive it defies explanation. There's Leilu in Kosrae, Taputapuatea in Raiatea, Nan Madol, of course. But they all share one thing: isolation. None of them are built near arable land. None of them are practical. All of them are sacred, and all of them are aligned with something out there. The stars, the sea, something we don't understand. It's almost like someone, or something, wanted to leave messages, breadcrumbs or warnings, but we weren't listening. Now modern science will tell you there's no lost continent in the Pacific, no Atlantis, no ancient super-civilization, and maybe they're right. But explain this: why are there oral traditions thousands of miles apart telling the same story? Why do the myths match the geology? Why does sonar keep finding shapes that shouldn't exist? And why did the people who built Nan Madol choose the most inhospitable place imaginable to carve their legacy? They didn't build here to survive. They built here to hide, and not from people. From something older. Something still alive in the dark. So let's recap. Nan Madol wasn't the beginning. It was the end, a final outpost, a tomb, a door locked from the inside. And now, the tide is rising, the reef is cracking, and the old stones are shifting. So the question isn't what happened to the builders, it's what if they didn't escape? What if they just delayed it? Because if they were running from something, maybe it's still coming. Some ruins crumble, some fade into the jungle, and some refuse to die. Nan Madol is one of those places. It doesn't just stand, it waits. And the deeper you go, through the canals, past the crumbling causeways, into the heart of the stone city, the more it starts to feel like Nan Madol wasn't built for the living. It was built to contain something. And now we're going in. Let's talk about the vaults. Not tourist spots, not Instagram ruins. I'm talking about the sealed basalt chambers beneath Nan Duas, what some call the Keep of the Dead. Archaeologists have tried to excavate them. Divers have tried to map them. But no one's ever fully explored what lies beneath. Not because it's forbidden, because it's dangerous. The stone passageways are flooded, unstable, and unnaturally dark. Even sonar gets scrambled down there, like something doesn't want to be mapped, and every time someone gets close, something happens. Compass failure, lights flicker, equipment dies. One diver swears he heard a chanting sound beneath the current, low, rhythmic, and not in any known language. Another came up gasping, eyes wide, swearing he saw faces in the basalt. He never dove again. Now, here's where it gets stranger. In 2011, a group of researchers tried to scan the main islets with ground-penetrating radar. Just standard archaeological stuff. But when they reviewed the data, they found hollow spaces, large ones, perfectly cubic, buried deep beneath the stone foundations, far deeper than any known chamber. And these voids, they weren't empty. The scans showed faint metallic reflections, structured patterns, nothing natural. But before they could investigate further, the expedition was halted. Funding pulled, permits revoked, No explanation, just silence. So what's in those vaults? No one knows for sure. But the oral traditions are clear. They say Nan Duaz was not a tomb for kings. It was a prison, not for people, for spirits. Dark ones. Night voices, as one elder put it. Entities too dangerous to destroy. So they were sealed, deep beneath the city, under layers of basalt, salt water, and sacred geometry. And here's the Siad, reapy part. When you ask who sealed them, the answer is always the same. The ones who came before. Let's break that down. Because if Nan Madol wasn't just a city, if it was some kind of containment structure, then its architecture makes a lot more sense. Each islet is perfectly placed. The basalt logs are magnetically aligned. Some walls bend in directions no human could build without precise surveying tools. And get this, several of the stone platforms emit low-frequency vibrations. We're talking infrasound, just below the range of human hearing. It's the same frequency that causes unease, hallucinations, even nausea, military-grade acoustic warfare. But this was built over 700 years ago, so either they discovered infrasound by accident, or they used it on purpose, maybe to keep something asleep. Here's something else. The rituals. We know Nan Madol was a religious city. Priests lived there. Ceremonies took place on specific islets at specific times of year, often aligned with lunar phases, equinoxes, solstices. But some ceremonies didn't align with anything at all. They took place during dead moons, nights when the sky was black, the tide was lowest, and the wind stood still. Locals say those nights were for the Stone Watchers. You weren't allowed to speak. Fires weren't lit. No music, no laughter, just silence, as if the city itself was listening. And then there's the symbols. Carvings found on submerged stones, glyphs that don't match any known Micronesian writing system. Some resemble Proto-Sanskrit. Others resemble symbols found in the Indus Valley or even Easter Island. How? How could cultures separated by oceans share the same symbols? Unless they weren't separate, unless they were all branches of something older, something that fractured, scattered, and tried desperately to forget what it once knew. So let's connect the dots. You have a city built on the sea for no strategic or agricultural reason. You have sealed vaults that detour to sci-fi explanation. You have vibrations, carvings, symbols, and ritual behavior consistent with containment, not worship. And you have magnetic interference and psychological effects still recorded today. What does that sound like? It sounds like a lock. Nan Madol wasn't just a city. It was a warning. And maybe that's why the Sodalur fell. Maybe that's why Isokalikel didn't stay. Maybe that's why no one rebuilt it, no one resettled it, and no one goes there after dark. Because even now, the vaults hum, and deep beneath the canals, behind walls of basalt and time, something still waits. Not dead, not alive, just waiting. And here's the part that really gets under your skin. What if it's waking up? The ocean is rising. Storms hit harder now. The reef erodes a little more every year. One day soon the water will reach the vaults, and maybe for the first time in centuries, the seals will break, and what sleeps in the dark will see the stars again. If Nan Madol is a lock, then it wasn't the only one. It was part of something bigger, a system, a network, not connected by roads or trade routes, but by something older, something beneath. Start with Leilu, on the island of Khosre. It's smaller than Nan Madol, less famous, less studied, but eerily similar. Basalt log construction, artificial islets, sacred burial vaults. Even the same strange layout, walls too thick, canals too narrow, stones too heavy for explanation. It's like someone took the blueprints for Nan Madol and built a prototype, or a backup. And here's the twist. Lelu is older. Go further west, to Raiatea in French Polynesia. There you'll find Tapu Tapu Atea, an ancient Mare temple complex. It's not made of basalt, it's coral limestone. But its placement is precise, aligned to the rising of Sirius and the path of the sun. Legends say it was a gathering point, a launch site for great voities, ages, a place where chiefs became gods meta, or monsters. And at its center, a forbidden altar now broken that no one was allowed to stand on. Not even the priests. It wasn't a place of worship, it was a portal. Still think it's just coincidence? Okay, let's talk about Penapi script. It's an undeciphered writing system found on carved stones near Nan Madol. Symbols that don't match anything in the region. And yet, some of those same shapes appear in Rapa Nui's Rongorongo glyphs, in the petroglyphs of Hawaii, even in parts of southern India. Cultures separated by thousands of miles, by time, by language, using the same marks. Why? Because they were taught, because someone showed them. Now, step into the ocean. Off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, down where the light fades and the current grows strange, you'll find a submerged formation that looks wrong. Terraces, steps, stone ridges cut at 90-degree angles. Is it natural? Maybe. But again, the signs point the other way. Faces carved in the rock, doorways, staircases to nowhere. Some believe it's a sunken city, 10,000 years old. And what lies beneath it? No one knows. Because the currents twist, instruments fail, and divers report the same thing, a low vibration, and the feeling of being watched. So what does this mean? It means Nan Madol wasn't built in isolation. It was part of a network of sites, each one placed with intent, each one aligned with something in the stars, and maybe something under the sea, like antennae or seals. A grid meant to contain, suppress, or warn. And here's where it gets really weird. In 2020, a group of marine geologists mapped gravitational anomalies across the South Pacific. They found subtle energy distortions, places where gravity is ever so slightly weaker. Like something beneath the crust is pulling down. The largest anomaly? Right beneath Pohnpei, right beneath Nan Madol. Let's ask a dangerous question. What if these sites aren't protecting us from something beneath? What if they're protecting what's beneath from us? Because maybe we weren't meant to touch it. Maybe we weren't meant to find it. And now, we're digging. We're scanning. We're exposing what was meant to be forgotten. And the network is starting to break. Do you feel it? The ocean feels it. Storms are changing. Tides rise faster than we thought. Fish vanish. Whales beach themselves. Like they're fleeing something. Like something old is stirring, and every living thing with instinct is trying to get away. But we're still building resorts, still dragging sonar cables across the seafloor, still cracking stones open to look inside. And maybe we're getting close to something we shouldn't. Let's go back to the old stories. The ones people don't tell anymore. There's a legend in Samoa of a god who sleeps in stone, whose dreams cause earthquakes. In New Zealand, they speak of Ruamoko, the unborn god beneath the earth, who stirs when balance is broken. In Hawaii, Kanaloa is the god of the deep, unseen, patient, tied to death and the unknown. These gods don't bless, they warn. And their homes, always the same. The sea, the vault, the dark. So let's connect the dots again. Basalt cities placed on tidal edges. Unexplained magnetic fields and gravity shifts. Interlinked symbols across thousands of miles. Oral histories about star-born builders fleeing a ruined world. A global pattern of structures aligned to celestial and possibly subterranean coordinates. This isn't architecture, it's containment. And every piece we uncover, every chamber we open, every scan we run, might be waking up something ancient, something we were never meant to remember. Because Nan Madol isn't alone. It never was. It's one seal in a web of guardianship stretched across the ocean. And if the others are failing too, then maybe the builders weren't just running. Maybe they were buying time. And maybe that time is running out. Some ruins echo, some lie still. But Nan Madol, it listens. And if you stay too long, if you go too deep, it starts to whisper back. Let's talk about what the locals don't say. Not the legends, not the myths. The silences. Ask too much about Nan Madol and people get quiet. Eyes lower. The air thickens. One Pohnpeian guide put it like this: some things are remembered in silence, because remembering them out loud wakes them up. So when researchers, divers, and spiritual seekers come looking for answers, there's always a warning. Don't dream in the ruins. Most don't understand until it's too late. In 1993, a French ethnographer visited Nan Madol to collect oral histories. She stayed in a nearby village, never entered the ruins at night, just observed, interviewed, catalogued. On her fourth night, she began speaking in her sleep. A local host reported hearing words in an unknown tongue, low, rhythmic, repeated over and over. By morning, she couldn't remember the dream. Just a phrase she'd scrawled on a page. It sees the breath. It follows warmth. She returned to France. 6 months later, she vanished during a solo trip to the Pyrenees. Her journals were found beside a cold stream, sealed in plastic. One page simply read, "The city walks when no one looks." You could dismiss that. Call it coincidence, fatigue, madness. But she's not alone. A diver in 2007 reported sudden auditory hallucinations while swimming near the submerged vaults. He heard what he described as a chorus of whispering mouths, but no breath. The next day, he suffered a seizure. Doctors found no neurological cause. And his parting words? There's no time down there, just thought. Let's pause, because we're drifting into uncomfortable waters. This isn't science. This isn't history. This is myth bleeding into reality. But that's the thing about Nan Madol. It's not just a ruin. It's a mirror. And what it reflects depends on who's looking. Some see mystery, others see horror. And a few, too few, see truth. But all of them feel the same thing, a weight pressing on the mind. Not malevolent, not kind, just old. In 2015, a remote viewing experiment, yes, that kind, was conducted unofficially by a fringe research group in Australia. The target, Nan Madol. The method, double-blind ESP probing of geographic coordinates. Multiple participants, unknown to each other, returned similar sketches. Not of buildings, not of stones, but of eyes. Rows of them. layered beneath the sea, staring without seeing, waiting. One participant dropped out mid-session, claiming an unbearable pressure behind the eyes. He later developed chronic insomnia and night terrors centered around drowning in a sea that thinks. This brings us to a chilling possibility. What if Nan Madol is not just a lock, not just a city, but a conscious mechanism? A place that remembers. What if the stones are more than structure? What if the entire city is a sensor array, a machine designed not to contain, but to monitor, to feel, to learn, and to warn? Now consider this. The basalt used in Nan Madol contains trace amounts of magnetite, a naturally magnetic mineral. Under certain conditions, magnetite can interact with geomagnetic fields. It's found in navigation systems, in migratory animals, and, in small amounts, in the human brain. Researchers in neurobiology have found magnetite clusters in the hippocampus, the part of the brain associated with memory and spatial awareness. What if, just what if, the builders of Nan Madol knew this? What if they built their city not just from stone, but from signal? A structure meant to resonate, not just with the earth, but with the mind. That would explain the dreams, the hallucinations, the whispers. Nan Madol doesn't speak with words, it resonates. And if your mind is open, too open, it starts to tune in. That's why some people feel it more than others. Not everyone hears the same song. Let's not forget the Isokelekel legend, the hero who overthrew the Saudeleur. He came from across the sea, entered the city, fought the rulers. But what most retellings skip over is what happened after. He left. He didn't rebuild the city. He didn't live there. He retreated inland, built his tomb away from the ruins, and told his descendants to avoid the site. Why? Because he'd seen something. Some say the final battle wasn't against the Saudeleur. It was against what controlled them. Here's the final piece. In 2023, an anonymous user uploaded a series of sonar images to an encrypted archive. They claimed to be from a private expedition near Nan Madol. The images showed something beneath the sea floor, a massive symmetrical shape buried under sediment. Not rock, not coral. Something metallic. When questioned, the uploader disappeared. The images were removed. But one caption remains, passed along in fringe forums. It dreams, and the city listens. So now we're left with a chilling possibility. What if Nan Madol is more than ancient? What if it's alien, not in origin, but in nature? Not built for us, not shaped by human minds, but built by something to interface with ours. A transmitter, a sensor, a lure. And maybe the reason no civilization ever stayed there is because you're not supposed to. Because the city doesn't want you to live there. It wants you to hear it, to dream it, to wake it. And once you do, you're never truly alone again. We call them the builders, but we don't know their names. We don't know their language. We don't know their fate. All we know is this: they were not us. Let's go back to the beginning, not just of Nan Madol, but of everything. Because the legend doesn't start with Pompeii. It starts before the sea rose, before maps, before memory, with a homeland swallowed by water, a place of 9 stars that burned and then fell. That's how one fragment puts it. Another version, passed down through Micronesian chant cycles, speaks of a place in the west, where stone floated and time moved differently. A world not lost by accident, but buried on purpose. Could this be a remnant of Mu? The so-called Pacific Atlantis? Maybe. But let's ignore the names for a moment. Let's focus on the pattern. All across the Pacific, Samoa, Fiji, Kiribati, the Marshalls, you find fragments of the same idea. A people who came from a drowned land, who fled in canoes led by stars, who carried forbidden knowledge with them, and who built cities no one could explain. And then, they vanished. Not in war, not from disease, not from colonization. They removed themselves. Voluntarily, as if completing a task, as if leaving something behind. Here's where it gets strange. Carbon dating tells us Nan Madol peaked around the 13th century. But the oral traditions, when viewed collectively, suggest something older beneath the visible ruins. Multiple divers have reported hidden chambers below the basalt platforms. One expedition in 2011 used ground-penetrating sonar near Temwin Island. What they found? A lower structure, buried beneath coral and silt, older than the visible city. Impossible to reach without excavation. The researchers went silent. Funding was cut. Data lost. All except one memo. The foundation doesn't match Micronesian geometry. It matches no known geometry at all. So let's ask it outright. Who were the builders? The Saudeleurs, maybe. But even their origin story says they came from elsewhere. Were they refugees, priests, scientists, or something even stranger? Maybe they were custodians, sent not to rule, but to guard. Some modern scholars have noticed something odd, the way the islets of Nan Madol are arranged. It's not random. When viewed from above, they seem to follow a kind of fractal pattern, mirroring cosmic geometry. Stars, molecules, quantum fields. A sacred design repeated through scale. As above, so below. What is locked in the sea was once written in the sky. That's the level these builders operated on. Not empire, not agriculture. Structure as symbol. There's a theory, whispered in fringe circles, that the builders weren't just fleeing a drowned world. They were fleeing something they awakened. Not a monster, not a god, but a force, conscious but without form, old but not eternal, alive but only when seen. Something that thrives on attention. They called it the Returning One. The name varies by island, but the story's always the same. It watched from below. It answered when called. And when it rose, it undid the world. So they ran, and they built, not to survive, but to contain. Each ruin, Nan Madol, Lelu, the buried temples near Tonga, they weren't cities, they were anchors. Anchors to reality, anchors to memory, anchors to keep the dream asleep. And now the dream stirs. Because we've lost the pattern, we've broken the rhythm. We explore, record, live stream. We dissect myth and call it fiction. But these stories were never just stories. They were instructions. And the builders tried to leave warnings, not in books, not in monuments, but in geometry, in vibration, in the shape of silence. One last thread, an ancient Micronesian chant passed down for generations, translated loosely by a priest in the 1800s. It ends like this. They sealed the mouth of the dreamer. They sang the stars back into sleep. They built the final gate from black stone, and they turned away forever, for to look back was to invite return. It's not a lullaby. It's a ritual, a memory of closing the door, and a warning, don't open it again. So where did they go? Some say underground. Some say they dissolved into light. Some say they scattered their bloodlines among Pacific peoples, blending, waiting, watching. But maybe, just maybe, they didn't go anywhere. Maybe the builders aren't gone. Maybe they're asleep, like what they sealed. And maybe that's what the islands are for. Not just to contain something else, but to hold them until the sky is safe again. Because the real question isn't, where did they go? It's, what happens when they wake up? For centuries, Nan Madol was quiet. Just stones. Tides. Wind. But not anymore. Something has changed. It began with the hum. Locals reported hearing a low vibration near the ruins, too low to be recorded, but strong enough to be felt, in the teeth, in the chest, in the bones. Fishermen described their boats drifting off course, compasses spinning erratically near the southern reef. One man swore the water became thick, as if pulling down like breathing in. The government blamed shifting magnetics, tectonic tension, climate change. But the elders knew better. The gate is warming, one said. The song is rising. In 2021, a private expedition quietly launched off Pohnpei's coast. They weren't archaeologists. They were contractors, backed by a multinational energy firm. Their public story? Deep-sea mineral mapping. Their real mission? To investigate anomalous readings detected by a satellite array 2 months prior, readings traced to a deep trench near Nan Madol. Sonar scans showed symmetry in the seafloor. Not natural, not recent. Beneath layers of volcanic ash and sediment, a vast circular structure, 300 meters wide, metallic, cold, and active. 3 days into the dive, all comms went dark. No weather interference. No known jamming signal, just silence. A search team found the submersible intact, tethered to the ship. No signs of struggle, but the inside was empty. No bodies, no logs. Only this, etched into the condensation on a monitor screen. We knocked. It opened. Then came the earthquakes. Between 2022 and 2024, the seismic activity around Pohnpei increased tenfold. Not just tremors, but pulses, every 37 days, regular, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Seismologists were baffled. But the rhythm matched an ancient Micronesian drum cadence used in pre-colonial rituals, specifically those meant to wake the old ones. Coincidence? Or a signal? Satellite images revealed subtle shifts in ocean color patterns, blooms of plankton where none should be, temperature anomalies in underwater thermal vents, and most disturbing, a new magnetic field anomaly directly beneath Nan Madol. One researcher described it as, like a switch has been flipped. The ruins are conducting something. And then came the disappearances. Not just divers, not just explorers, but locals. 6 in 2023, 4 in 2024. All near the ruins, all gone without a trace. No signs of struggle, no footprints. Just gone. One teenage girl returned. She wandered into her village barefoot, soaked in salt water, eyes unfocused. She couldn't, or wouldn't, speak. Only scribbled this on the wall of her home. It's not a place, it's a door. International interest spiked. But instead of archaeological support, Pohnpei saw military vessels. First from the US, then China. Then an oceanographic monitoring group funded by a private space firm, name redacted in most documents. Locals were pushed back. Tourists were diverted. Drones began flying over Nan Madol nightly. Why? Because the data was undeniable. There were frequencies rising from the seafloor, ultra-low, infrasonic, and modulating, like a voice learning how to speak again. Here's where things get disturbing. A leaked audio sample, posted briefly before takedown, contained 5 seconds of the recorded signal. Audio engineers analyzed the pattern. Their conclusion? It matched human brainwave patterns during deep REM sleep. Not similar, not approximate, identical. Someone, or something, was transmitting dream logic into the ocean. And it was working. Several locals began experiencing shahs, red dreams. Descriptions matched across different villages. A black city floating in the air. A voice humming beneath the water. Eyes in the stone that opened only when no one looked directly at them. In every dream, the same final phrase echoed in their heads. We are returning. You built the gate. You will open it. So what are we dealing with? Let's recap. A submerged, symmetrical structure beneath Nan Madol. Seismic pulses resembling biological rhythm. Magnetism rising from the stones. Disappearances without trace. Dreams shared across minds. And whispers of an arrival. This isn't myth anymore. This is a reactivation. But here's the terrifying twist. According to recovered fragments from an obscure Polynesian prophecy cycle, the builders didn't just seal away a threat. They synced it, tied its sleep to celestial timing, an ancient calendar lost when the sky shifted. Every 26,000 years, the Earth wobbles. A cycle called axial precession. And guess what? We're at the turning point. The builders didn't hide the return. They timed it, which brings us to now. Not someday. Now. The hum is rising. The pulses are accelerating. And governments are preparing, not to explain, but to contain. Satellite jamming, underwater blockades, disinformation campaigns. Because Nan Madol is no longer a mystery to be studied, it's a problem to be managed, and time is running out. So what happens next? No one knows. But if the builders were right, if Nan Madol is a lock, if the thing beneath is not dead, just dreaming, then maybe we're already too late. Because you can seal a gate, you can bury it beneath the sea, but all it takes is one knock and one answer. In the end, the mystery wasn't about how Nan Madol was built. It was about why. Not a palace, not a tomb, not even a city. Nan Madol was a message, a living code, a structure meant to survive memory itself, a story too dangerous to write down, a warning made of stone. We used to think we were the first to sail, to map, to build, to dream. But the builders knew better. They didn't just witness something unexplainable. They survived it, and they tried to make sure we wouldn't have to. Their last message isn't hidden in glyphs. It isn't buried in coral. It's everywhere, if you know how to look, in geometry, in sound, in myth. What sleeps beneath is not evil. It is hungry, and it listens to those who listen back. That's the core, not fear, but attention. Because this thing, this ancient presence, doesn't need worship. It needs witnesses. It becomes real when we believe it's real. And now, through data, exploration, digital echo, we've started believing again. We opened the story, and it hurt us. Here's what the final chant says, found carved into a drowned wall beneath Nan Dawas, the central islet of Nan Madol. The dreamer was not sealed in stone. The dreamer was sealed in story. Forgetting was the cage. Memory is the key. We didn't break the seal with bombs. or sonar, or science. We broke it with curiosity, with attention, with 1,000 retellings on podcasts, in videos, in whispers online. We knocked, and now it's listening. All across the Pacific, the signals are converging. Pulses detected in Tonga, Samoa, Kiribati. Night glow phosphorescence in waters untouched for centuries. Magnetic interference distorting satellite images, especially over Micronesia. This isn't isolated anymore. It's spreading, not as a creature, not as an army, as a thought, a signal, a dream, a return. Some think it's a god, others think it's a frequency, a mind, a being older than language with no fixed form. The builders called it the Returning One, but maybe that's not its name. Maybe that's just what it does, over and over, in every cycle, in every lost world. It comes back when the world remembers it. It becomes real when the story is retold. And Nan Madol, that wasn't a prison. It was a mute button, a way to turn the volume of the world down long enough to forget. But the mute button is off now. The song is back, and the dreamer is stirring. So what do? We can't unsee. We can't unknow. We can't go back to silence. The builders knew this moment would come, and they planned for it. In one of the last chants, found scrawled on coconut bark preserved in a cave far inland from the ruins, we find this final riddle. If we sleep, the world sleeps. If we wake, the world breaks. But if you learn, truly learn, then maybe it can dream with you, not through you. It's not a warning. It's a choice. We thought the builders vanished. They didn't. They stepped outside the story and waited and watched. And now, they're watching us to see if we repeat their mistake, to see if we become builders or just the next ones to vanish. Nan Madol is no longer just a ruin. It's a mirror. It shows us what we fear, what we remember, what we call back into being. And if the returning one is rising, then so is the question. Are we ready? Are we worthy? Are we the end? Or are we the next beginning? Because the builders didn't leave the world. They left us a story. And the final line is ours to write. It is,